Congressman Allen West, thank you so much for joining us here on Newsmax TV today.
Kathleen, thank you, and thanks for coming down to our Fort Lauderdale office.
Well,
appreciate that.
Thank you for having us. We're really happy to be here. New Hampshire primaries tomorrow. You have said that you don't plan to endorse anybody at this time, but I'd like to get your thoughts real quickly on each of the GOP presidential candidates, beginning with Newt Gingrich. What's your take on him?
Well, I think without a doubt he has proven to be the smartest person up there. He has won all of the debates. He definitely has a clear vision policy-wise as far as where he wants to take the country. But I think that the negative ads that were run against him out in Iowa really did put a little chink in his armor. And now it's a matter of can he recover from that in New Hampshire and then as we continue on to South Carolina and Florida. I think that really he's probably the biggest competitor for Governor Romney as we go forward.
What is your take on Mitt Romney?
Well, I think Mitt Romney really has to, prove himself as far as being a true conservative. A lot of people are looking at his record when he governed there in Massachusetts, which of course is a blue state, and they want to know that he will go with the right type of policies and stand by those and be proven as such. Because when you look at Speaker Gingrich, I mean, there were some incredible accomplishments that he did. I mean, the fact that he balanced the budget for those series of years, welfare reform, which also was authored by Congressman Clay Shaw down here in South Florida. So those are some very concrete things, but I think it's also a question about the intensity and the level of enthusiasm that we want to see Governor Romney be able to create as well.
What about Rick Santorum? He's really surged recently. Can that surge last, do you think?
Well, when you start to look at what the Iowa caucus is a reflection of, very simple point, 120,000 some odd voters. Well, you've got about, I think, 300 to 350,000 registered Republicans just right here in Broward County. So is that a true indicator in Iowa? And then also you have a very small sampling group out there that is not reflective of the total diversity of America. So it really is about, social conservatives and evangelical Christians. Now, will he be able to take that and do very well in New Hampshire and then transition, of course, to South Carolina and Florida? It's about, can you have the type of organization? Can you raise the type of funds to be able to do quite well? I think Florida is going to be an incredible testimony because it's a diverse state, it's a very large state, fourth largest in the union. And when you look at the fact from North Florida down to South Florida, there's a different type of electorate that you have to be able to run the whole gamut of the spectrum of issues on.
Of the candidates, who do you think will end up winning Florida?
Well, it's kind of hard. I think that by the time you get down here, you may be down to 3 or 4 real true people in the hunt. And I think that based upon the organization and the structure that I've seen so far, it will probably come down between Governor Romney, Speaker Gingrich, and Congressman Paul and that group, because they do have a presence here already.
Ron Paul, why do you think that he's resonating?
I think that when he talks about personal liberty and the Constitution, that is an incredible connection. When you talk about fiscal responsibility for the federal government, that definitely perks people up. But when you transition from the fiscal policies and matters over to the national security and foreign policies, he really loses people. And I have a big concern because think about the fact that Mahmoud Ahmadinejad is on a Latin American tour, which will take him not too far away from the borders here that we have of Florida. I believe he's supposed to go visit Cuba. So we got to understand that the world is still a very dangerous place, and we need to have people that can portray that type of strength and not what the enemy will perceive as weakness.
Do you have a favorite candidate at this point?
No, I sit back. For me, my most important focus is to be a good congressional representative here in District 22. We got a lot of things we need to get squared away up there in Congress. We're going to start this kabuki dance all over again about the payroll tax extension because for whatever silly and insidious reason, the Senate only wanted to extend it for 2 months. And, Speaker Boehner decided to go along with it on unanimous consent. So there's a lot of issues that are facing us. I'm concerned with our economic situation, happy that the unemployment number has come down to 8.6 and 8.5%, but I'm concerned that whether or not that's a seasonal bump, we need to be able to sustain that because you have close to, I believe, 3 or 4 million jobs that were completely lost. And you have a large contingent of Americans that are underemployed and have dropped off the rolls. So we can't start dancing in the end zone too soon, and I think that's the concern that I have there.
Who do you think could win the nomination, and could that person go on to defeat President Obama?
I think that pretty much everyone that we have on the table can win the nomination, probably other than Congressman Ron Paul. I think that his problem is with his foreign policy and national security vision, because you've got to be able to draw a clear contrast between who you are, what you represent, conservative constitutional principles, and that which President Barack Obama represents. The big government, this whole economic equality and wealth redistribution and fairness and fair share. You've got to show, that America is not about class and caste. America is about equal opportunity, not equal achievement. And I think that each one of our candidates can do that, but they got to understand it's going to be a brutal bloodbath because this is such an important election cycle.
You touched on the economy earlier. President Obama is planning to ask for another hike of the debt ceiling by $1.2 trillion to a staggering $16.4 trillion. Is this going to fix our economy?
No, it's not going to fix our economy. And I think that that's an indicator that the president is not serious about fixing our economy. When you look at the fact that in his tenure as president, we're not even talking about a complete 4 years, he has added more debt to this country than from 1776 to 1992. You look at the fact that we're working on our 4th year of a possible, $1 trillion plus deficit. 1.42, 1.29, 1.3 trillion. And when people say, well, George W. Bush was just as bad, I mean, his highest annual deficit was $500 billion, and that came in his last year in 2008. And of course, he had Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi, holding the purse strings. So once again, you've got to be able to show that contrast between who we are and our vision for the future as opposed to Barack Obama's vision of greater debt and deficits.
President Obama says that he has hope for the economy in 2012. Given President Obama's policies, do Americans have reason to be hopeful for our economy in 2012?
No, they shouldn't be. I think that what President Obama is just going to sit back and, pray or hope that things somewhat fall into his lap. He's not going to do anything as far as reforming our tax code so that our small business owners have some type of certainty and predictability. He's not going to do anything to lower the corporate business tax rate and eliminate loopholes so that the $1 trillion of capital that's sitting offshore can be repatriated back here so we can have production and manufacturing. He's not going to do anything to correct the regulatory environment that his administration is putting forth. In calendar year 2011, the federal government, his administration, added over 71,000 pages of new regulations to the Federal Registry. That's not how we're going to heal this economy.
Do you think the president has given up on hope and change?
I think the president has given up, period, and he's in a campaign mode. I looked at the news reports today. He's going to host the Dallas Mavericks, and then he's going to have a campaign event, and that's it. So when you look at the words that he said about a couple of weeks ago, that he is just going to disengage from Washington, D.C., that's not leadership. That's an absolute abdication of leadership.
That was going to be my next question for you. By not having a relationship with Congress, what does this tell you about President Obama as a leader, and what are the consequences for Americans?
Well, that's not leadership. Leadership is based upon courage, it's based upon competence, commitment, conviction, and character. Well, this president, he's focused on another C word, that's campaign. And so he is completely checked out, which means that, going back to your previous question, nothing is going to move in this country because he is not going to press forward. And what even concerns me greater is not just these recess appointments, but the rhetoric surrounding these recess appointments that he's going to bypass Congress. I mean, he has a complete contempt for the legislative branch, and obviously he does not understand that the founding fathers set this up with checks and balances and that we're co-equal branches of the federal government. We don't have an imperial presidency, but I think that's what he's starting to believe.
President Obama's recess appointment of Richard Cordray to head a new consumer bureau, is this an impeachable offense in your view?
Well, I think that once again, this administration has a funny way of just straddling that line. So it really is not a clear-cut, maybe impeachable offense, but it's definitely something that we have to stand up for. Once again, we have an agency created through the Dodd-Frank law that has no responsibility to report back to Congress, and we have an individual who's going to be head of that agency that, is seemingly, again, we had no input as far as Congress, and we can't do anything as far as their output. And I think we already have a consumer protection agency. So why do we need another level of bureaucracy? And that, again, is the contrast between who we are, talking about reducing the size and scope of the federal government, getting it constitutionally mandated, as opposed to President Obama, who wants a bureaucratic nanny state.
How do you see Republicans responding to this?
we have to be very vociferous about this. And I think that too often we kind of stand down. And that comes back to that whole payroll tax debacle. We were right on the policy. And we backed down because we allowed the politics of demagoguery to take over. When you tell people that the means by which we're supposed to pay for this 2-month payroll tax plan is that we're going to raise loan guarantee fees for the government-sponsored enterprises. In other words, the American homeowner is supposed to be the one paying for a 2-month tax gimmick. This is crazy. And furthermore, you can't do tax policies in 2-month increments. I mean, talk to people in payroll departments about how this is supposed to work. So what we have to do is understand that we've got to get into the arena, and we got to battle the president and the liberal progressive ideology in that arena of ideals and show the American people we have better.
Let's switch to foreign affairs real quickly. Saber rattling in the Middle East. Iran is threatening war and conducting military training exercises in the Persian Gulf. Iran, we learned, is enriching uranium in underground bunkers. Do you see this situation spiraling out of control, and is war or conflict with Iran inevitable?
Well, I think you have to make sure that a credible, viable military threat is still on the table. When you look at the fact that Iran is now conducting military exercises along the border with Afghanistan, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad is over here in our hemisphere on a Latin American tour, and all of these other things that is happening, sooner or later we're going to have to realize that sanctions will only have an effect if the regime cares about the standard of living of their people. That's not the case. And there are other countries that are not willing to, really turn the tides. I think South Korea is saying they won't participate in this because they still want to receive their oil shipments from Iran. So you have to have a viable, credible military threat, because in that part of the world, despots, dictators, autocrats, and theocrats only understand strength and might. And that's what we have to show.
Recent cuts to the military and no more two wars at once policy. What's the impact for U.S. national security? Does this put U.S. national security at risk?
Well, absolutely. I mean, think about what you just said. The president can't sit up and say, well, we're not going to fight in two different places. Well, Mr. President, the enemy has a vote. And what you have to be able to do is you look at the geographic area responsibilities that we have, the UCOMs, the PACOMs, the CENTCOMs, the AFRICOMs, and you start to make a threat assessment for the next 15 to 20 years. And when you understand that threat assessment, then you start to develop the requirements, the capabilities, and the capacities that your United States military forces have to have in order to do three things. And this is the overarching national security strategy. You must be able to engage, you must be able to deter, and you must be able to strike. We have to move away from nation-building and occupation-style warfare. We need to move away from a Cold War era forward-deployed military to what I call a power projection platform military. We need to reduce the amount of time that our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines are spending in these combat theaters of operation, 6 to 8 months. So when you put all of those things together, now you're talking about building a coherent national security strategy that is focused on the enemy and also focused on supporting your allies as well. But just to say that we're going to pack up our toys and not play, that's not a national security strategy. Furthermore, the military cannot be the bill payer for the fiscal irresponsibility in Washington, D.C., because the military budget is only about 19.5, 19.6% of our overall budget. And that includes the base budget and also the overseas contingency operations. Now Iraq is going away, so that's going to shrink. The driver of our debt, the 62% that we spend on the net interest on our debt, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. And so it is cowardice to not confront that 62%, but then pick on the military. And I've been on the other side in a military that was made a bill payer, and then all of a sudden your amount of deployments and contingency operations go through the roof. When we went to Iraq in 2003, we didn't have enough body armor for the guys in my battalion. I am not going to allow that to happen to my friends who are still in the military.
As a retired U.S. Army colonel, what do you make of President and Mrs. Obama's recent outreach to military personnel and our veterans?
Well, I got to tell you something. The great thing about our men and women in uniform, they can sniff it out when they're being used as a photo op and a prop for political purposes. And they see that very clearly. If you are concerned about what's best for our military and also for the families of our military, it is all about what you stood up and you said over at the Pentagon, which was an unprecedented visit to the Pentagon. You need to be able to get out there with them and hear their concerns and make sure that they're protected, they have the right tools, and they have the right weapon systems to be able to go out there and soundly defeat the enemy on this 21st century battlefield.
Last question real quickly. Tim Tebow and the Denver Broncos stunned the Steelers in OT
Yeah,
last
they
night.
did.
Thoughts on Tim Tebow's success?
Well, look, I think that when you look at the mechanics of Tim Tebow, people will say, no, he's not the prototype NFL quarterback like a Dan Marino or maybe even a Drew Brees. But the thing is, the kid's a winner, and he has something in his heart. Look, I went to the University of Tennessee. Tim Tebow was a pain in my side when he was a quarterback for the Florida Gators, and I think that he inspires people to play at another level. So here was a team that was not on track to go to the playoffs, and all of a sudden Tebow comes in. They go 7-1. They had some rough times. They lost their last 3 games. When I looked at that game last night, I mean, even the fact that they were ahead 20-6, and the Steelers came back and tied that game, they didn't put their heads down. They came out, and in 11 seconds, they won in overtime. That's the shortest overtime victory ever in the history of the NFL. So hats off to him.
What can Washington learn from Tim Tebow?
Oh, very simple. I think that Tim Tebow never believes that he is ever down. He always believes that he can be victorious. I believe that he has an impeccable character, and I think when you look at his integrity, and I think that if we can get those type of things restored back to Washington, D.C., and the individuals that we're sending there as elected officials, then the greatest days of this nation will be ahead of us.
Congressman Allen West, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Kathleen.